hope that this report shows that we have a real opportunity now. We have a roadmap to make a better society where people and Parliament work together for that society. So let me introduce my colleague commissioners. Femi Oyeyiran, an actor, filmmaker and social activist, it says on my script. Paul Kane, CEO of Community DNS and founder of Nominet. Meg Hillier, London MP for Hackney South and Shoreditch. Dr. Christina Leston-Bandera, Senior Lecturer in Politics at the University of Hull. And Robert Halfon, Conservative MP for Harlow. Emma Mulqueeny will be joining us as well. And we do have one commissioner who can't join us today, that's Tony Pearce, who is the President of the National Union of Students. So now my job is to hand over the formal proceedings to the Speaker of the House of Commons, the Right Honourable John Bercow.
Helen, thank you very much indeed. I much appreciate your involvement in this project from the outset, and indeed, colleagues, that of all the commissioners who, for the avoidance of doubt, have given both unstintingly of their time and expertise, and freely. And there aren't that many things that you get for free these days, but they have been prepared to pool their expertise and indeed their passion for the subject of digital technology, digital engagement, and potential digital transformation of the way in which we do our business as politicians in our interaction with civil society. So I'm hugely grateful to everyone, to Helen, to Femi, to Emma, to Paul, to Meg, to Robert, to Christina, and indeed to Tony. In addition, let's just put it on the record, it wouldn't have been possible to proceed with any degree of efficiency in the pursuit of this project if it hadn't been for takers out there, that is to say, people who were willing to give evidence and share their time and offer their thoughts. It has been very much a two-way dialogue, and as I think I shall probably reference later, the method has been the message, and much of the work has been done interactively. Reference has already been made to the live stream via the internet and to the fact of a simultaneous event taking place at Swansea University, hosted by the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Richard B. Davis. So thank you to Richard and to the university. Over the past 25 years, we have lived through a revolution created by the birth of the World Wide Web and the rapid development of digital technology. This digital revolution has disrupted, I think it's fair to say, old certainties and challenged representative democracy at its very heart. With social media sources such as Twitter, blogs, and 24/7 media, the citizen has more sources of information than ever before, yet citizens appear to operate at a considerable distance from their representatives and appear disengaged from democratic processes. Now, that's not an indictment of citizens, it's arguably an indictment of, and certainly a challenge to, Parliament. Recognising the stark contrast which exists between the ever-burgeoning potential of digital technology as a vehicle for two-way communications and the way that Parliament, politics and politicians are perceived, I thought it right to take the initiative to establish a special commission to consider how the digital revolution has changed or might further develop British representative democracy. The Speaker's Digital Democracy Commission began its work in January 2014. We're publishing our report today, of course, in early 2015, just a few days after Parliament's 750th birthday. We set ourselves a tough task. It was far bigger and bolder than our House of Commons inquiries generally are. Let me explain. This is because I recognise that to think strategically about public participation in digital democracy, there needs to be a willingness to listen to challenges and to contrary views, both from across the country and indeed potentially from around the world. I recognise the importance of engaging with external experts and people outside the Palace of Westminster, the bubble, the Beltway, call it what you will. I recognise too the strength that comes from seeking out expertise, information and ideas from staff and politicians within Parliament. And I would just like, again, to emphasise my gratitude to those who've helped. I've talked about the commissioners. There has been a fantastic, hugely dedicated and, for the most part, utterly inspiring team of people within Parliament who work night and day to try to achieve what we hope we can, through this method, achieve. Members of the Commission and I wanted to hear the voices of those people who are often rather patronisingly described as hard to reach, though I suspect a more accurate description would be hard to hear, as much as recognising the voices of those people with in-depth and ingrained detailed knowledge. Which is why, unlike a select committee, colleagues, the Commission on Digital Democracy was willing to take evidence, ideas and information in any format, and we did not stipulate precise rules about submissions. My aim at the outset of this project was to make our methods part of our message. As a result, we received responses via email, video, a web survey and a web comment thread. We conducted countless conversations via social media, took more than 100 face-to-face meetings with experts and enthusiasts, and held no fewer than 23 roundtable discussion fora in venues as diverse as a chip shop in Stockport on the one hand and Facebook's London HQ on the other. We have attracted Twitter followers in 63 different countries and have held highly productive collaborations with universities as far as field as Swansea, Sheffield, Edinburgh, Newcastle, and here in London, Westminster and UCL. The Commission chose to focus on a number of quite concrete and identifiable themes. How, through the use of technology, can we legislate better, scrutinise better, represent people better? How, through technology, can we engage with civil society better? And how, through the use of technology, can we encourage the better engagement of members of civil society with each other? I thank again the members of the Commission for their energy and commitment over the last year, and everyone involved in our inquiry via social media, event participation, idea suggestion and evidence giving. I think it's fair to say in very short order that although we found there are aspects of our democracy that people do prize and champion, there was a sense that Parliament could do a whole lot better. We could present information more intelligibly. We could change our use of language to make ourselves more easily understandable to members of the public who are not part of the political class. We could make it easier for people to feed their thoughts into us. Now, all of these messages I think we have attempted to take on board. In charting that course forward, we have set ourselves some exacting targets. By 2020, the House of Commons should ensure that everyone can understand what it does. By 2020, the House of Commons should be fully interactive and digital. The newly elected Parliament of 2015 should immediately establish a new forum for public participation in the debating function of the House of Commons. By 2020, secure online voting should be an option for all electors. By 2016, all published information and broadcast footage from Parliament should be easily and freely available online in formats suitable for reuse. Friends, these targets are underpinned by more than 30 detailed recommendations. Time prevents me from going through all of them, but I should like to give a taste of what the new fully interactive and digital house we envisage might look like. Everyone should be able to understand, as I said, what the House of Commons does. As people told us about their experiences of voting, contacting their MP or finding out about Parliament, or why they do not do those things, it became clear to us that barriers to getting involved must be addressed if every UK citizen is to have equal access to of democracy in the UK. Not all of our solutions are purely about technology, but taken together they ensure that we will be in fit shape to exploit digital technology to the maximum. For example, there was wide agreement from those offering evidence that parliamentary language needs to be more accessible. Some people suggested that digital tools and jargon busters could be used to translate complex terms into simpler language, whereas others thought that the best approach would be to review and simplify parliamentary language. We came to the conclusion, frankly, that both will be necessary. At the same time, Parliament needs to get much better at presenting information in a way that is clear, relevant, and accessible. One thing we came back to again and again was the realization that whilst people do not care greatly for the existing institutions and mechanisms of politics, they are passionate about the issues that matter to them, and the information they want from Parliament is often primarily focused on what Parliament is doing about those issues. Just to underline the point, because there may be different opinions on this matter, my own firm conviction on the strength of being in Parliament for nearly 18 years and serving as Speaker so far for 5.5 and doing a lot of external events, is that this notion that people are apathetic about, for which perhaps read uninterested in politics, is fundamentally flawed. I simply don't accept that that's true. I absolutely accept that people don't much like politicians. I absolutely accept that people don't much like the way Parliament operates. I absolutely accept that most people don't like the very, very aggressive, high-octane, testosterone-fueled shouting match that they witness on their television screens on a Wednesday lunchtime. But the notion that people aren't interested in politics seems to me to be completely wrong. I always say to students around the country and school children, I do speak to a lot of groups around the country, who is interested in the sort of job they're going to get when they leave school? Huge numbers of hands go up. Which of you cares about having a decent home in which to live and which you can call your own? Huge numbers of hands go up. Who cares about the health care that will be available to them if they get sick? Huge numbers of hands go up. Who cares about doing something to mitigate the plight of the most destitute people on the face of the planet? Forests of hands go up, and I always say, well look, that is the stuff of politics. That's what it's about. Those are the issues. And politics is about the arbitration of difference and the attempted reconciliation of disparate priorities within limited budgets and time. So people are interested in politics, they're just fed up with the system within which, and the straitjacket within which they are forced to operate. So this is something that technology should be able to assist with. We can't resolve the problem of disengagement through technology, but it should be a tool to assist us in the presentation of information in a meaningful and user-friendly fashion. And not just presentation of information to people, but the opportunity on the strength of that presentation of information for people without great difficulty then to be able to engage with us. Echoing, if I may say so, the Hansard Society, perhaps I can put in a plug, nobody's asked me to do so, but I will anyway, the Hansard Society, which I think is a fantastic organisation dedicated to the promotion of awareness of Parliament and the cause of parliamentary scrutiny. So it's a superb organisation with magnificent staff. We're recommending that Parliament should provide easy-to-use tools to help people to track Parliament's activities on specific issues. A new forum for public participation in the debating function of the House. As many of you here today will know, the House of Commons started to use a second chamber, known as Westminster Hall, in 1999, because of the limited time available for debates in the main chamber. Debates in Westminster Hall tend to be more informal, and dare I say it, in some cases better informed than those in the main chamber. We believe that Westminster Hall provides an excellent and indeed an unique opportunity to experiment with opening up House of Commons debates to the public and to create a direct link between what is being said in Parliament and the people whom it represents. People interested in the topic for debate should have the opportunity to discuss it online before the House of Commons debate. MPs could contribute or indeed simply observe. We believe that this would help to inform their contributions and to enhance the debate in Parliament. This innovation might be known as the cyber chamber or open house.
If at the end of the next Parliament it has been successful, it could then potentially be extended to debates in the main House of Commons chamber itself. A fully digital and interactive House. As just one example of what we mean by a digital and interactive House, the Commission would like to see a move to record votes in the House using MPs' smart identity cards. We recognise that moving away from voting by going through the division lobbies would be a major change, but by installing several card readers in the lobbies and producing an electronic list, the length of time the current process takes, which is typically 15 minutes per division, a long time for each vote, could be reduced, as well as reducing the risk of human error. It would also mean that a computerised record of who had voted and how they voted would be available to the media and the public immediately after a vote had taken place. This may seem to be a revolutionary thought, but it hardly be said, I think, to be a disagreeable one. Voting, colleagues, and elections. The Commission sees a very real need to do more to reach out to groups of people who feel excluded from the political process, especially young people. Many of our recommendations seek to address this, but in one area in particular we look to government to do more, and that is in the area of voting and elections. It will, in our considered view, become increasingly more difficult to persuade younger voters to vote using traditional methods. Hence, if you're following the logic of this and agreeing, there is an urgent need to investigate the means by which citizens can be given access to online voting. I'll just point out to you in passing, I visited Estonia as part of the inquiry. There, a quarter of the population are now voting online, and those numbers seem set to rise. And certainly in that country, I accept there are issues still fully to explore, there is no real anxiety about the security or integrity of the ballots. As far as they're concerned, they have cracked it. We recommend that online voting should be an option for all citizens by 2020, provided, of course, that the inevitable concerns about electoral fraud and secrecy of the ballot can be overcome. I frame it, colleagues, in those terms because it seems to me that it's important to have an intended direction of travel and a stated ambition. And the Commission does have an intended direction of travel and a stated ambition. So our will is to facilitate that. Of course, the detailed work is absolutely imperative, but we're not starting from the position of saying, oh, I think it's going to be rather difficult, let's put it off and not decide that matter. We're starting from the position of saying, this seems a good idea in principle, it would extend choice, it can be user-friendly. We must, of course, satisfy ourselves on integrity of the ballot, but work and exploration can be done in order to meet that test. Open data. Parliament produces a great deal of information about scrutiny of government policy, bills and decisions on other matters ranging from the economy to military action. Presenting this information so that it can be found and understood easily is a considerable challenge, and one that Parliament, frankly, has not always met. At the same time, there is an army of developers and political geeks, if I might be so bold as to call them that, who would like nothing better than to be able to take the raw data produced by Parliament and easily convert it into apps, websites and alerts to keep the public better informed. Parliament has recently made a considerable amount of useful data available for just that purpose, but we would like to see more. That's why we're recommending that by 2016 all published information and broadcast footage produced by Parliament should be freely available online in formats suitable for reuse. A particular priority perhaps is that Hansard, that is to say the daily official report of every word spoken in Parliament, should be available as open data by the end of 2015. To conclude, I hope you will find our report informative and thought-provoking, and see that we have tried to provide the plans for a comprehensive assault on the barriers to public participation. Our recommendations would also facilitate, we believe, better scrutiny and improve the legislative process. Most of our report is directed towards the House of Commons. I hope that it will find favour with colleagues. Some of the exciting developments which we anticipate in the report, like the new online video service, are on their way already, and I'm confident that the House administration will give a fair wind to many of the others, such as improvements to our website and making available more open data and real-time reporting on the activities of the House. I will be drawing up an implementation plan so that we can monitor its progress. This report represents a form of sat-nav for the House of Commons over the coming decade. It shows us where we need to be. It outlines a route to get there. It's explicit on the benefits that heading in this direction will bring. It now falls to us collectively to have the courage to undertake that journey. Thank you for coming this morning and coming in such large numbers. That in itself is a source of great encouragement and succour to us, and I hope that you'll feel that your visit here and what follows will be very worthwhile. Thank you very much indeed.
I now introduce Femi Oyeniran, who's going to speak for the commissioners.
Good morning. How are we doing? Good? I was going to do a selfie, but it's just not going to work. Emma, who was supposed to be with us, but is stuck in traffic. Last week we met, and Emma was talking to me about her daughter, who's, I'm assuming she's 6. She's a teenager. And she said her daughter came into her room and she was really stressed out. She was really worked up about something she's seen on Facebook. She saw a post, yeah, about Boko Haram and the fact that they've killed 2,000 people in Nigeria. No one in the media is talking about it, but everyone's talking about Paris. And she was really worked up about it, and she wanted to know what Parliament could do about this. And I said to Emma, do you know an MP actually raised an urgent question about that last week? She said, really? I said, yeah. And we concluded that the main problem that we have in the UK at the moment is we don't have a democratic deficit. We have a communications deficit. So young people are having conversations on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, all these different social media networks. MPs are having debates in Parliament and it's recorded in, you know, in all the different ways that Parliament records the debates, but there's no bridge between the two things. And for me, I feel there's this stereotype of young people not being interested in politics. I like to tease the other commissioners and say I'm the young one. I'm not that much younger anymore, but you know, there's this stereotype that young people are not interested, but young people are. It's just that the conversation that young people are having is not being plugged into by MPs, and the conversation that MPs are having is not being plugged into by young people. So I feel that our hope through the report is that these conversations can be married somehow, which I feel will further inform the long-term democratic legitimacy of this building, of everyone that works here. I'm talking from an outside perspective, so Mr. Speaker and everyone's probably thinking, what's he saying? But, you know, but the truth is, MPs need to do more to interact with young people and to inform young people about what issues that they care about. I most enjoy being on the commission because I really enjoyed the approach that was taken. It was an approach that involved a lot of outreach in evidence gathering. We, as Mr. Speaker said, there was an event at a chip shop, and as well as at Facebook HQ. And so I feel, for me, the commission is an example of the approach that I feel that Parliament should take. Parliament should try to reach out to people wherever they are, rather than hoping that people in mass will come to Parliament. And so, for me, the main message of the report is Parliament needs to go to where people are, including the online space, especially if they want to reach out to young people. Thank you.
Who wants to say what? Questions? Please, Seth. Perhaps be helpful if people could say who they are and where they come from, which their organisation is, or part of the country, or whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Simon.
Please stand up when you ask a question.
There's always awkward officials. I should stand up. I should get the microphone. Simon Camp, somebody that's a fellow for the Centre for Welfare Reform and was mentioned in the report, but I think I only played a bit part because the Commission came up to Chesterfield. Two wider issues, and I know the member for Nottingham North is in the building. I just wonder how, with your implementation plan, Mr. Speaker, we need to think about the whole thing about devolution, because that's going to change the ball game. There's this whole issue about English votes things, because we can go down a path, and then if all the devolution and various things of Scottish MPs can't vote and stuff, it then slightly muddies the waters if we're not clear about the information, because I think there's lots of information that's come out on a very short timetable, but for somebody like me who's learned to speak to my other colleagues, that's a lot of information to take. It's like reading Hansard, the bound volume, and not even getting to the finish. And I just think we ought to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and just finally, I think you've been a breath of fresh air in the House of Commons, because your one line that I loved was, you must write 1,000 times how to behave in parliamentary questions. I think it should go down in parliamentary folklore, because it was a brilliant put down in a funny way.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I mean, I'll have a go at answering the first point, but very briefly. But if others want to come in, please, any of you do. Thank you very much indeed for your generous compliment. As far as coping with what devolution might bring, I suppose my answer to that would be, if we have both the technology and the mindset, we have got to be able to adapt and present information in real time that reflects what might be changing here. I don't think it's for us now, colleagues, to anticipate decisions that are down the road. I mean, you reference English votes for English laws. Well, I mean, that's a very important matter, but it's a matter of very considerable debate and argument. What we're saying is, what we do needs to be much more clearly presented, and the way we work, including, I suppose, of course, as part of that, what powers different parts of Parliament have, need to be communicated in terms that are clear and accessible. If those powers change, or if the relationship between different parts of the UK legislatively changes, well then, you know, we've got very quickly to adapt to that. I wouldn't want to put us in the position of trying to predict that that will happen, but, you know, what is of the essence is versatility and speed of adaptation. Graham Allen, and then the gentleman two along from him, next to a distinguished former parliamentary
Thank you very much.
by Mr. Fluke. Welcome, Adrian.
Mr. Speaker, can I firstly say what a great report this is, and what encouragement it will give to those of us who are trying to reform our democracy and make it more relevant to people. And your own role has been, as the gentleman said, a breath of fresh air. It's great to have a speaker fighting for Parliament, not merely supporting the status quo, where the executive often seems to be dominating Parliament. And I think these proposals will be a way of ordinary people accessing our proceedings much more easily. They also mirror, I'm very grateful to say, some of the recommendations of the Political and Constitutional Reform Select Committee, who've just produced a large report on voter engagement. And I think that another thing that they both have in common is immense amounts of public participation. I think we had a world record number of people participating in our consultation, over 3,000 people on our own report. And that's because digital democracy, even the faltering efforts that we've made ourselves, actually enables lots more people to make a contribution. My question, Mr. Speaker, however, is not that we've done the easy work, both your Commission and the tremendous work of the Commissioners and my own Select Committee. It's been many hard miles and lots of evidence taking and trying to compromise to get something that we can move forward with. But the really hard work, Mr. Speaker, I want your comment on, which is how do we now persuade party leaders to put some of this stuff into manifestos so that we can make it part of the general election debate and actually make it happen? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm very happy to ask Robert and Meg to come in. I mean, clearly the party's ownership of this project is very important, because otherwise, I don't say nothing happens, but much less happens than could happen. So, you know, one would be looking for a positive reaction to this report and a commitment to act from all of the party leaders. And I will, in a moment, just ask Meg and Robert to comment on that. We don't have a Lib Dem representative here today, but of course I'd be looking to Nick Clegg's party as well. There's quite a lot in the report, colleagues, which doesn't depend on the parties, it's fair to say. So don't get me wrong, we absolutely need party buy-in, just as frankly we needed party buy-in 5 years ago, and we still need party buy-in in relation to the Speakers' Conference on the representation of women and ethnic minorities and disabled people, because a lot of that falls to parties to be proactive, and they haven't been as proactive as they should have been, or indeed as they said they would be. So I'm not unmindful of that. But there's quite a lot that we can do here through, to put it bluntly, administrative action, if I can put it that way. Things that we've recommended, which don't even in some cases require, some might require a vote of the House, some things don't require a vote of the House, some things will depend on good cooperation between staff in this place. We now have a new director of digital, and you know, that person and the director of information services will need to work together. I've no desire to bore this audience with management speak, but it is simply a fact that we've had a whole inquiry into the governance of the House, spawned by an honourable disagreement about the leadership of the House on the administrative side back in the summer. And Jack Straw's committee has produced a report which recommends a new management structure. In my view, a very good report which recommends a much improved management structure. And there will have to be an implementation plan. And it's perfectly clear that part of the thinking is that we need to be more efficient, more modern, more accessible. And I'm very much looking forward to working with some of those senior staff and their teams to ensure that those parts of the recommendations which frankly fall within their bailiwick are implemented as efficiently and as effectively and indeed as quickly as possible. But on the subject of the parties, if other people would like to come in, and it would provide the joy of a voice other than mine.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's been a privilege to serve on this commission. I went to see the film The Imitation Game recently, and the kind of computer that Alan Turing invented reminded me of how Parliament works. It's still very analogue. You need the brain of Alan Turing to understand how it works. And whilst, as we can see from the audience here, who are busy on their phones, everyone has gravitated from those kind of computers to Android, BlackBerry or iPhone. And so this is why, to me, the Commission was incredibly important, particularly the proposals of looking at cyber parliaments and online democracy, and in engaging the public more with Parliament and making sure that Parliament engages more with the public. I think the best way of getting the changes in the manifestos of the major parties are to do exactly what the report says, to do what it says on the tin, to quote Ron Seal, to advocate. I will advocate with my own party. I'm glad to see a Conservative whip has just turned up as well over there. But I will advocate.
Probably I'm here because I contributed.
I know.
It says a lot that it's at 8:30 on a Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
These aren't here.
I just meant that light-heartedly.
I would just make the point, quite a lot of people are having power breakfasts at 8:30 on a Monday morning. I don't know what's the matter with whips. What's the matter with them? What are they worried about meeting at 8:30 on a Monday morning? But anyway, these meetings are arranged. These meetings are arranged by the Commission. I'm very pleased to tell you, although whips are very welcome, these meetings are not arranged by whips.
But so my job is to advocate it with my party. I'm sure that Meg will do the same. I think there are organisations here like 38 Degrees that I know will be encouraging parliamentarians to, whether they agree with all the measures, I don't know, but will be encouraging parliamentarians to adopt these things and to move towards more grassroots digital democracy. And I think that's the way we need to do it. But it's not just up to us, it's up to you as citizens and members of respective parties to do everything you can to ensure that our parties adopt some of these proposals.
Absolutely, and can I just add to that? I think, you know, parties, if a party edict comes on high, it doesn't necessarily change the behaviour of every MP, dare I say it. But actually, the last intake in 2010, a large turnover in Parliament made a very big difference to how Parliament digitally engaged. So there will be a generational shift. But I echo Robert's point. It's also about citizens demanding of us or telling us what it is they want. I've been to some interesting events over the last year about who are intermediaries between Parliament and the people. Well, I think Robert and I would consider we and our colleagues do that, whether it's on a doorstep for those who are digitally excluded. I still believe in that face-to-face contact, whether it be by social media or other networks. But we can be that intermediary, but I can do my job far better with the help of my constituents, whether it be the one expert who's been in touch with me, who we then have a real meeting about an issue that has really informed some of the work I've done in Parliament in my decade here, or whether it's a group of residents or concerned about a wider issue or a national issue. And I need that interaction. So any way that improves it, I can't see any sensible politician improving it, rejecting it. What I would say is that at selections, are any of you who are active in a political party asking the candidates in front of you, not how brilliant their back CV was, but what are they going to do to engage in future? And it always staggers me, that even when you're talking in the distant past about just sort of face-to-face surgeries, how little the average party member ever knew whether an MP or not so much MPs, particularly councillors at local level, even turned up to their surgeries. And that's pretty important. I think that ability to be available, whether it be face-to-face or in person, is something that parties and the people need to hold MPs to account for.
I think we've got a question from the gentleman there. And can I just mention, colleagues, that we've got a question here that I'm also going to take. But I think the gentleman there, and I just want to say, by the way, Graham Allen does a fantastic job as chair of his select committee, and you know there is someone who's been thinking independently of whips for a very long time, and you know his select committee has started to chart a way forward, and we've learnt from your committee, Graham, and from you, so thank you, and thank you for making the effort typically to turn up and offer your support and encouragement today. Please.
Good morning, everyone. Right. I'm deaf, okay. This morning I found the presentation very interesting. But one thing that concerned me is no mention about how to make digital democracy accessible to deaf or disabled people. Right. For example, in the UK, there are about 10 million deaf and hard of hearing people. So very important to make online access available to deaf people. For example, you mentioned about making resources available on the website, also in plain and simple language. But for many deaf people, English could not be their first language. They need access in the form of British Sign Language. So my question for any of you is, have you thought about translating the written resources into sign language for deaf people to access on the internet? That's one question. Another question is the digital report at the moment, printed copy. I'm thinking about blind people who may want it in alternative format. Example, large print, or braille, or spoken translation. I wonder if this alternative format is already available for people to access with different disability.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether Paul or...
one more thing to add. Sorry, one more thing. My name is Brian. Right. Work for Definite Equality. I come from Stoke-on-Trent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know whether Paul or Christina or Robert, one of our colleagues, would like to respond to that.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Within the report, we do make a suggestion, a recommendation that there should be better use and more use of the British Sign Language translations, and also we make reference to additional subtitles being placed on video material. So the goal, as you've rightly said, is to try and create an environment that is more digitally inclusive. So everyone, whichever age group, whichever their technical capabilities, are able to be involved in this democratic process. And by opening up data, gives us the ability of supplying information to you, information to all of you, so you can potentially build apps to actually address your own user community. It's only by having a dialogue, a two-way exchange of information, can we enhance the digital world in which we are, the parliamentary process in which we work. So it's a dialogue and making sure we have mechanisms in place to embrace your community and to embrace all communities in this whole process.
Now, colleagues, I'm very conscious there are others who want to ask questions. But what I'd like to suggest is, because we're short of time, that we take them in threes, and I will encourage panellists to answer. Can we start with Lord Kirkwood, Archie Kirkwood, and then take two others after him? If I may take the lady in the front, thank you, and the young gentleman at the back with the blue tie, indeed. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, can I add a Liberal Democrat voice to the buy-in? I think it's a wonderful initiative, and I think it's been brilliantly prosecuted and in timely. But can you remember the House of Lords? Average age 68 and a half. We have got a joint, as you know, as most colleagues know, a joint bicameral platform for digital services, and I would make a plea that in your important follow-up next steps of work, that you work with the Information Committee in the House of Lords, try and make sure that the two houses march in step. And finally, I think that we need to recognise, I used to be a member of Parliament, I know how hard-pressed they are. This will increase the workload of particularly conscientious MPs, and we've got two conscientious MPs for the Commission. We must recognise, and I hope the Commission recommendation, the offices of MPs and the House of Lords might be additional support to get the feedback that they make the loop, to get the democratic engagement that you've been working so hard to achieve.
Archie, thank you for that. We'll come back on that. Let's take the second question here. Thank you.
My name's Anne Collis. I'm from Barod, a workers' cooperative in Wales. Really encouraged by your commitment to using language that ordinary people like me are going to understand. You're up against a problem. I talked to neighbours and friends and they couldn't work out what digital democracy meant. I wondered if you've got any ideas how you're going to put into practice using language that people will understand.
Thank you. And the third gentleman at the back. Yeah, thank you. We must take this question. What's it called?
Adrian Burby for Whippersnapper UK. I'm 16 years old, and I'm the founding editor of a young political opinion publication, and we seek to give many young people the opportunity to voice their opinions to a group of MPs and many other political influencers. One of the key concerns which was raised to us by one of our readers was that with increased public access to legislation, making it via this process of technology, is there not an increased risk that policymakers will be more prone to be swayed by populism and conduct themselves in a way merely designed to boost their online popularity?
Thank you very much indeed. With reference to that last question, I've often heard it said that if you pursue a policy of making Parliament more digital, you will be making life easier and giving a greater opportunity for people who are already techno-savvy, and who in some cases are perhaps part of the political class, not within Parliament, but within civil society, that is to say lobbyists, pressure groups, sectional interests, and so on. And I think that the answer is that that danger doesn't mean that we shouldn't go digital. What it does mean is that parliamentarians have got to use their judgment and have got to recognise that they are elected to be representatives and that we're not conducting democracy in a sort of Greek city-state fashion, and we don't have rule by opinion poll or rule by instant majority on Twitter. So yes, it is possible that some people will shove rather more than others, or that some people digitally will be more active or more articulate or more insistent than others, but MPs do have other sources of information and representation, and I think that they've just got to weigh those considerations in the balance. And so, you know, it is a challenge, but I don't think that it's an insuperable obstacle to the sort of progress that we want to make. In relation to Archie, perhaps I can just say, absolutely, we've got to work with the Lords. And I think there's a scope for cost saving as well as cost incurring. Because if we share more services with the Lords, and there was already an agenda to try to deliver that, because there are some fairly absurd, at the extreme, some fairly absurd examples of where we don't share services and costs are almost certainly greater. I know in the straw review of the governance of the House, a former clerk of the House, Malcolm Jack, drew attention to the fact that, you know, there wasn't a shared service in terms of the provision of parliamentary wine. And Malcolm seemed to think, rightly or wrongly, that that was because, and this may be very unfair, but he seemed to, and it wouldn't have been you, Archie, because you're not a snob about anything. So I'm sure you're not a snob about wine. But he thought that the problem was that the House of Lords didn't approve of House of Commons' judgment in terms of champagne quality. Well, you know, I don't know whether that's true or not. It was not something in which I've ever taken an interest. But I do think that we have got to share services, and if we shared services, we could cut costs. But we shouldn't duck the fact, and Archie's right, perhaps brave, but right, to highlight it, that in some respects there may over a period, colleagues, be increased costs. Personally, I've always been very wary of the expression cutting the cost of politics. And I absolutely understand that you want to avoid unnecessary costs, but it seems to me that, you know, democracy does cost money, and what we've got to do is fashion a democracy that we think is right and proper and as representative as possible, and then resolve to finance it. And, you know, if there are some increased costs, you know, they're not increased costs in the form of money going into parliamentarians' pockets, but if our offices need to be further developed and upskilled, well, you know, that, I think, if I may say so, colleagues, is a price people pay for more efficient books. I sometimes think that people who complain a lot about, you know, costs incurred in running of parliamentary offices would also be the first to complain if it took longer to reply to their letter or their email. You know, we do need staff. And, you know, typically MPs have 3.5 staff in an office. Well, you know, the volume of correspondence and emails that we get dwarfs what was received by parliamentarians even a decade ago, let alone half a century ago. And in terms of simplification of language, well, we've just got to start on that course.
But chip in on that. I represent Shoreditch, and Emma Mulqueeny, who's not with us, but she works with Young Rewired State. So she's working with, we spend a lot of time talking to and working with people who develop apps. So the open data thing is really key, and all commissioners were absolutely strong on this. And if there's open data, I can envisage, for instance, if an issue for you is, I don't know, let's say for argument's sake, use of the Welsh language in passports or something, if somebody could develop something, an app that would mine the open data for the relevant information and translate it so people know when it's being discussed, who's discussing it, and what's happening. So actually that could be a start. It doesn't solve the problem completely about language, but having the open data opens up a wealth of opportunities. And the example that really works in the public sector is Transport for London, which provided all the data on bus and train movements and so on for free out there, and that spawned about £10 million worth of business and useful apps. So, you know, a typical Londoner will have different ways of finding which bus is coming on whichever device they prefer to use. So I think, you know, the world is your oyster. You know, it's about you out there taking what's being proposed in this report and making it work for citizens. Don't leave it all to us, or we'll kind of maybe won't get it right, dare I say.
Robert?
On the populist argument, I'm guessing the same argument was made when TV was open up to politics. And I actually have faith in the British people. I think British people are always vote on the whole for the government that they believe is right at the time. And whilst populism sometimes triumphs and it's a novelty value, I actually think in the long term people make the right decisions. And just on the meaning of digital democracy, from the lady from Wales, I think simply it means using the internet to help the public engage with what goes on in Parliament, and using the internet to help Parliament engage better with the public. That would be my definition.
I think I'd like to take one more round of questions. Can I just float, because I'd like somebody to answer this. I do have a view about it, but I'd rather somebody else have a go. We've had an inquiry from, I think it's actually from our friends at the chip shop. So, does secure online voting mean surrendering more privacy? Obviously a key issue in the debate about online voting. I don't think secure online voting does require us to sacrifice privacy, but I'd like to hear someone else answer that question. Can I take the threesome? Let's have somebody from this side, perhaps the young woman there and her colleague somewhat to the right of her. Your good self. So you two, and then this gentleman here with the black jacket.
Hi, my name's Rachel Farrington. I run an organisation called Voting Counts, which allows young people to compare political parties and learn a bit more about Parliament. I was wondering, and I think Meg touched on it a little bit, whether the resources that you're planning to provide will be open for third-party developers like me to use easily and kind of copyright-free as such.
Start as soon as you can.
I think that's a very succinct answer. I don't want to shortchange you, but if you're happy with that, that's encouraging. Your good self, please. And then the gentleman here. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Edith, and I've been contributing to the upcoming Kenny report and the democracy chapter. We echo a lot of the issues and the recommendations that you guys have provided, but one issue we've found is that there's a very big spectrum of political participation amongst young people. At one end you have people like me who are involved in pretty much everything they can get into. On the other end you have young people who don't touch it. And I was wondering how your recommendations can ensure that every single person on that spectrum has an improvement of participation rather than just benefiting the top end. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, and the gentleman here, please.
Bob Watt, University of Buckingham.
Yeah.
I think the report is 97% excellent.
Okay.
Recommendation 26, no. We saw what happened with the Howarth report in 2000 when we got postal voting on demand. Postal voting on demand led almost immediately to the shambles of the Euro elections, then to Aston and Bordesley Green, then to Slough, then to Woking, and next week Tower Hamlets comes up in Court 36 at the RCJ. May I suggest to you that we just do not have sufficient security to stop voter intimidation or voter buying or vote buying at the online polling booth, and I fear that your recommendation is way too ambitious. Maybe all right in Estonia, but remember in next door Sweden, if I remember my geography correct, if you want to vote and you're unable to get to the polling station, a voting official will come and see you individually. Estonia is one place, Britain is another.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's a reaction.
And there's a reaction to that, and if I can ask colleagues to take them as a package.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I hope people have made a note of all these questions.
I'm Julia Higginbottom. I'm the CEO of Rewired State. I would come back to you straight away on that. The government's already working really hard at GDS to do GDS Verify. And it is an experiment, but it's a risk worth taking, in my opinion. It's not going to necessarily be the thing that's going to solve everything, but we have to try and go down this route and see what else we can do, because yes, there is going to be fraud, but you can have that person to person anyway, and whether you go and make your mark on the paper or not, you are still risking it. Okay, we have to get to a point where we've got something that gives more participation, and I think the risk is worthwhile.
Right, okay, and we may have time for one more, but I think we're going to have to be a bit ruthless
I'll
about
just
this
comment
and have
on
a spokesperson, or maybe or two, Paul and
I'll just
Robert,
comment
perhaps.
on the online democracy. I think personally it's one of the most exciting parts of the report. I think that we vote as we did in the dark, going in a pencil, walking to a thing with a metal box is like in the dark ages compared to where the public are. And I think if we can have online banking and have the security for that, I think we can develop the security for online voting. It may take some time, but I think that we have to move towards that because that is what the public want.
Who else wants to come in? Please, Christina.
Can I just comment on the question about young people? I would encourage you to read the report because there's actually lots and lots of mention of young people in there. And one of the things I'm very pleased about is that it's not all just about digital, it's about reaching out to a lot of different groups. And one of those groups, obviously, is young people. And it's about transforming that gap that you described there into a more normal participation to the political system, but also recognising that you have to do much more in terms of education. And so education plays a huge part in the report. And little things like a section on petitions about having messages, information displayed in a specific way, looking at young people, but also things like going out, trying to reach out to groups of people who are not usually committed or participating in politics, which include some of those people you're mentioning. So I would encourage you to read the report because there's much more about that in there.
Thank you, Christina. Paul, the
very
last word.
briefly, in response to the question we received online, does online voting potentially risk one's privacy? I think before one would proceed down the path of facilitating online voting, we need to make sure the parameters are in place to ensure safe, robust online electoral systems. Within today's world, unfortunately, there's cyberbullying, which needs to be fixed. There are many ways of online bullying which need to be fixed. So there's no real difference between the real world and the virtual world. So we need to identify the problems, but the purpose of the report is to lay a route map. Almost, as Mr. Speaker said, it's a sat-nav. We're trying to identify the destination. I hope we make it to the destination, not all our recommendations, but if we get 97% of them, that's a result. So thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. That's it. We're already behind time. Please keep the conversation going on Twitter. There's a Q&A with Facebook with Mr. Speaker going to happen almost immediately. And this is just the beginning. And I think throughout the morning we've said this isn't just about what Parliament needs to do, it's what everybody needs to do. So if we can make this happen, then we're going to have a Parliament fit for the future, not just focused on the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.